Hello, everybody. We somehow made it through last week with like 3 major events in Florida and a hurricane and all that good stuff. And I don't know about everybody else, but I'm still trying to catch up on sleep for some reason. Week out of the office, and then it all piles back when you come back. But for everyone that was able to join us down in Florida at the MSP Community Block Party, man, that was awesome. I mean, when was the last time you were able to be that up front close to a band that you heard on the radio and grew up with, kind of thing? So that was awesome. The All American Rejects absolutely rocked it. And thank you to everybody who got their shoes wet and jumped on buses and came down through some pretty crazy weather. And, thanks to, ConnectWise, who worked with us to get those buses in and out of their conference for the people that were at IT Nation, and to all the vendors that, trusted us with a little bit of time and money to put this together. Thank you too, because couldn't do that without you. So if you didn't make it and you want to relive that event, mspinitiative.com, go to our Facebook page, the album with all of the photos. I think there's like 800. I think somebody told me. I think you, Sade, are there. I have this side project I'm working on. I'm getting all the clips and videos that everybody recorded. I'm trying to stitch them together to kind of rebuild the conference. The concert. So once I do that, that'd be cool, because it was absolutely awesome. Those guys, sometimes you hear bands that are not as good as what you remember on the radio or on, the MP3 player or on your iTunes account, but they actually did pretty good job, pretty good concert. So
on your MP3 player, how old are you, George?
Yeah, I still keep those around for doomsday when iTunes goes down and you can't do the streaming services, but I digress. Very last. So this session and every other session will be available on mspinitiative.com under sessions. It has every session we've done back until March 2020. Block parties, right? We finished Orlando. Again, go to the Facebook page. You'll see all the stuff there. We have one more Channel Strong tour coming up, believe it or not, right here, not next week, but the week after. So eat your turkey, get your sleep in. If you're in Florida, so it's like Tampa, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, not in that order, and Atlanta, we're coming to you. MSPs are hosting us in their parking lots. Call it like the end of year tailgate tour, for lack of a better term. All are invited. We just want to close out the year strong, and obviously network with people and kind of wrap up some of those, hopefully those conversations from last week. So channelstrongtour.com, you'll see all that information there. Don't forget to register. Jason is my special guest of the day. Jason Bystrak over at D&H. Strong distributor in the sandbox that we probably all know, and if not, we'll learn a little bit about them today. But Jason, talk to me about how your last week went, man. You were there, you saw it, you lived it.
Yeah, well, George,
are your feet still hurting?
I think everybody's feet are hurting, but in a good way. And yeah, thanks for having me today. And also thanks for all the hard work that you and your team did to help with the block party last week. It was great. I know we were down at the Acronis event in Miami and then made our way up to the ConnectWise IT Nation events. A busy week for the D&H crew, but it was awesome. And again, kudos to your team for helping to keep it fun.
Yeah, that was the Acronis event. Actually, I stopped by, kind of wanted to check it out. I told those guys I was going to swing by on the way into Orlando, and that was actually a pretty well attended event. I think there was a heavy international crowd, if I got my bearings straight. Kind of reminded me of a quasi Microsoft Inspire-ish type crowd. Excuse me, but it was pretty well attended. I mean, they were able to get most of their conference off before the weather kind of kicked in, which was good. And I know they busted a ton of people in between Fort Lauderdale and Orlando to go into IT Nation, which was a nice touch.
Yeah, 100%. It was a great event. I think I heard it was over 1,600, partners and MSPs at that event, which was awesome. You're right. The weather didn't really impact it. They did have to move some of their stuff indoors, unfortunately, which always stinks when you're up from the New York area, where like I am. You get down and see that beach down there, and we didn't get to do much of that. But the content and
I'm from Philly area, as we all know, and that's not too much different than other than I think, did I read properly that you're getting 6 feet of snow before the next NFL game?
Yeah, it keeps going up. I mean, now I'm hearing 12 feet, but who knows? We get these lake effect snow bands up in the Buffalo market up here, and they usually hit south of the city, but this time they're going to hit the city. and could be anywhere from 1 inch to 4 feet. It sounds like.
So do they play in the snow at 4 feet, or do they move the game?
This is football, George. Of course we play, right? We're playing Cleveland, the Bills this week, so not going to be. We're both used to snow.
All right, lots of running the ball. I think I remember the Snow Bowl game back in Philadelphia with LaShawn McCoy. That was good times.
Yeah, and your Eagles are on a roll this year. Maybe not so much last week, but that's one of the teams to beat for sure this year. So congrats on that.
Let's hope your quarterback's, I guess elbow gets better. And yeah, I mean, listen, I know, they always talk about the Miami Dolphins undefeated, this, that, and the other, but like, to be honest with you, the claim to fame is the Super Bowl. Like, I don't care if I lose 2 games, 3 games, 1 game. Get me a trophy and a parade. I'm good.
Spot on.
100%. So Jason, you've been around the channel for a long time. I don't know if everybody knows you. I surely do. For anybody that hasn't bumped into you in the hallway at an event or didn't realize kind of your history, if you don't mind kind of sharing, like, I don't know, your journey, right? How did you get to your point today, right? You've been in technology for some time.
Yeah, absolutely, George. So I did about 24 years with another distributor is kind of how I got started in IT. The last 10 years I ran their cloud business, which involved a lot of MSP. So really got to love that community. I moved over to Axient and had a chance to work with some great guys like Adam Slutskin and Matt Natrab and that crew over there for a while. And almost 4 years ago, I joined D&H to really enhance and accelerate what we're doing here with our cloud and services business. And I now lead what we call our modern solutions business unit at D&H.
That's cool. So you literally built a new team there, right? To like build that out, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, when I came in, we had like 7 people that they gave me on the team, and it was great. We built out a nice cloud practice, but now we're about 150 people strong in the business unit. The way we go to market, we support 4 categories. So it's applications, collaboration solutions, security, and then data center infrastructure. And we really focus on, having one phone call that can help with multiple delivery models and financing options. So, we don't bounce you around. You call up, based on the category of products you need. They can support any of the vendors in that category. They can put together a solution that's on premises, in the cloud, a hybrid. They help you wrap around your managed services or your professional services. We can supplement those where needed. And we got a great program called X as a Service, is a program that we can actually finance the whole solution together for you, which is pretty cool. And then put it in monthly payments and accelerate the cash flow for the MSPs, which they love. Well,
let's be honest, cash flow is king.
Yeah.
I think a lot of MSPs, throughout my journey, right? I feel it's a little over 20 years now. I think a lot of MSPs try and take that on their own sometimes, right? Because they think, no worries. And then they realize that, sometimes on some of the low margin items, they have to bundle into some of the other projects. It's probably not the best way at scale. So unless you're really cash flow positive and you have the money to do it, and I would argue with the market the way that it is today, you want to keep your dollars close. That sounds really good to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's never one size fits all. It's really about being flexible with different delivery options, different services, wraparounds, and financing programs, right? Yeah. Because, it sometimes is deal by deal with MSPs, right? They might want to do it all on their own on one, but they might need help with another one, whether it be the financing or the services. So, that's why we step up and you really work hard to understand their business model and support their specific opportunities that they're bringing to the table.
So, like, it's funny. I'm here in suburban Philadelphia. I think D&H is headquartered like an hour and change from me driving, right? Like out in Harrisburg area. Should probably take a trip down there sometime because they're so close. But I think D&H, I always thought, laptops and switches and all that other good stuff, right? That comes in a box. I didn't realize you guys went too deep into the subscription stuff. Or, I mean, it seems like it's like on the newer side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think our legacy was very heavily indexed in endpoint devices and peripherals. And, we tend to be one of the top distributors, number 1 or 2 pretty much every month with a lot of the key vendors there. We still are. But, where I came in, and we've been working hard to really advance that modern solutions business practice. And, some great vendors that we're doing some incredible growth with, such as Cisco, such as Microsoft, such as Hewlett Packard Enterprise, right? And a lot of others that we look after, about 100 vendors in our portfolio for that part of the business. And one of the real keys is that we've got a great cloud marketplace platform that automates a lot of the purchasing, provisioning, subscription management, and invoicing. We integrate deeply into MSP tools like ConnectWise, like Datto, right? And it's kind of cool too that the MSPs can actually integrate and wrap their own services into our platform to bundle them. So that's a bit of a differentiator. And then they can
That's cool.
Thing. Yeah. So we really purpose built the whole platform specifically for MSPs. That's our sweet spot.
So I'm going to go off the beaten track here. So, I mean, hopefully NCE is a little bit behind us. I know that Microsoft kind of put, like, hey, if you didn't migrate by this point, it's okay. We'll still let you run for a while. I think I saw somewhere that come January 1, like any of the special kind of programs and escalators and stuff that they do will just not work on the older stuff. Did you guys, like, how did you see that process on your end, right? I mean, it's not just you, the whole, world had to deal with those changes coming down from Microsoft. I think a lot of people with a lot of different platforms struggled with the new SKUs and the terms and the lengths and, all that other stuff that comes into trying to get that into their PSAs and their like agreement management systems. Hopefully we're past that point. How did you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know that we're fully past it, honestly, but I would tell you that we worked really closely with Microsoft to understand what was coming when they first announced NCE, which I guess it's almost 2 years ago. With the platform, we engineered it to make sure that it's got all the proper rules and security procedures to protect MSPs. Honestly, the last thing you want is one of your sales reps, or even maybe you extend it to your end customer, and they're canceling seats that's going to cause a penalty for you, or you still have to pay for, right? So we kind of foolproof the whole platform to build around NCE rules. We work to educate a lot of our partners about the rules behind that, what they need to do, what the incentives look like. And you're right, as of right now, January 1st is the kind of the looming date where Microsoft will be eliminating all of the back-end incentives for the old style subscriptions for Microsoft Modern Workplace 365, right? So if you don't move to NCE, you're definitely at risk for losing out on your back-end incentives. We certainly are helping partners to prevent that by moving those over. And our platform has very easy conversion mechanisms to just, with a couple of mouse clicks, you can change the subscription. So definitely something that the MSPs want to be looking for.
Yeah, I think that's I think that was a little bit frustrating for a lot of the people, even a lot of people joined these calls, because it was like, hey, we all moved everything to get all this stuff done. And then all of a sudden they were like, well, it's okay if you didn't get it done. And we're like, wait a minute. So I got penalized for being ahead of time. What happened there? But I digressed. So big picture, right? MSPs have a lot of moving parts. I don't think it's, every other conversation seems to be about security. I mean, it's hard to not have that, somewhere in the mix. So, but I almost think that too much focus. I mean, I'm not saying security is not important. It clearly is focal, but you still got to run the other parts of your business, right? Like the other stuff didn't just disappear, right? The day-to-day stuff, the plumbing stuff, the, end user help desk and all that other thing. So like when you're talking to MSPs, and you talked to a ton last week, clearly, but what are the other challenges that seem to be coming down their way? Because, it seems like there's no one, it's like all roads lead to Rome, but not everybody takes the same path, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, and I think a lot of the MSPs will agree, is that the responsibilities just keep growing. Like people think that every single thing that goes on with technology now is owned by the MSPs. And in some ways it is, right? You sign up for that. So, and I think of some of the things that are challenging, definitely security. We're hearing, for example, that, with more MSPs getting into things like Microsoft Azure and AWS, right, that there's security risks on people spinning up mass amounts of infrastructure in those public cloud providers. You've got to make sure you've got the right platform security to lock that down. So that's definitely keeping them up. You think of the pandemic, and it used to be like you managed an office space, right, for somebody. Now that perimeter is extended out to people working at home and crazy hours, so your support desk, your tools that you're using suddenly change quite a bit. people moving into cloud, and how do you add value and manage all those different cloud applications or infrastructure that are happening. So, I think lastly, even, you think about video collaborations becoming a necessity because of hybrid work post-pandemic. And, I think the end clients are looking at MSPs to say, hey, how do I light this thing up so that I've got a common platform, whether it be Teams or Zoom or Cisco WebEx or whatever, that can work on my mobile device, my laptop, working from home, working from the coffee shop, conference rooms, huddle rooms, and they're turning to MSPs to solve for that. So those are some of the conversations we're having, at D&H to, help them figure that out and navigate it. And, I wouldn't say that anyone's got it all figured out, but I feel like we're working closely with some great MSPs to help solve a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely to your, the first thing you said is super true, right? The MSPs, kind of still under that, hey, I'm bundling all these, things underneath of me. And like, hey, if it has a blinking light, then it's my problem syndrome. I think over time, people have realized that they can't cover everything, right? And like maybe doing that creates a lot more liability than they're probably either realizing or comfortable with. So I think the business model over the many, many years has shifted and morphed and changed. I know Keith Nelson, who's on the line, says, hey, stop doing the blue light special, differentiate yourself based on actual business value. That doesn't mean that the other pieces don't need to have checked and handled too, right?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing more partnering too, which is interesting. It used to be, you're an MSP, you just did it all. You hired the people, they had the skills and they did it. But we're seeing, whether it be for security, which can get complex, a lot of the MSPs need to become MSSPs and partnering with people that can actually help watch some of the blinking lights and remediate security incidents, or, maybe somebody that's doing level 1 help desk support or overnight support or things like that, so they can get better scale. So we're starting to, aggregate a number of different managed services and managed security services to kind of backstop them. And again, it's not one size fits all. It's about consulting with that partner and deciding, can we supplement their services capabilities to help them get scale and better profitability?
Yeah, I think that's the big question mark, isn't it? Profitability, right? I know we got all these great, organizations and, kind of groups out there that, try and help people focus on, are you actually making money? Are your accounts actually generating profit dollars? Or are you at the end of the year looking at the bank account, finding out that you're working for free? I'm sure that's very frustrating when you find out at the end of the year that you're negative on a lot of accounts because you're burning more time, or quite frankly, on the flip side, they're not capturing all of the expenses and invoicing that they should. And so as a result, they end up losing revenue that they should have invoiced for.
Yeah, it's a very financially intense business being an MSP, right? And I think it's a combination of having the right tool sets to be able to manage that and understand and track all that, and then the right skills to apply it. I think there's a lot of good work being done by different peer groups and consultants out there. And I know all that stuff's expensive, right? And but I think picking and choosing when you make those types of investments to scale your business is so important.
Yeah, 100%. So if I were out there and I'm like, hey, what specifically, like, what are the top couple of things, 3-4 things that if I think I could use help with, where did D&H come in and help fill some gaps for me?
Sure. Well, I think, number one is that, MSPs are definitely being requested and required to provide a lot more software and cloud solutions. Our cloud marketplace being fully automated and integrated with common MSP tools makes it really easy to do that. And again, that platform is built for MSPs. Secondly, we talked about X as a service before, right? It's kind of complex to put a full solution bundle together and then figure out how to price it in a monthly subscription model. We built a tool called our X as a service tool, right? That can, allow MSPs to pick a hardware device, right? And then literally takes them through a walkthrough of all the different services and software components that are common add-ons. And then, shows right away what the price is per month to be able to do that. And they can even save it as a quote and process as an order. So we're seeing a lot of success there. And again, that program provides upfront payments for the full term of the agreement, which is pretty cool because they get cash flow acceleration. So the marketplace, the exit service tool. I think the big third thing is that, we have built out a great portfolio of MSP software and services. that we can put together that are more for them to run their business. So, the software or tools, a lot of different vendors that we've got in there that they can use to provide automation or remote monitoring, support, ticketing, things like that. And then the services, again, we can step in and actually provide some of the labor to run some of that stuff for them to supplement what they're doing. So again, that's all about working with them to understand their profitability and, and where they scale and where they have SLAs that are difficult to meet, that we can help them plug that in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, guys, I'm going to, make sure, everybody can jump in, obviously, and talk as we normally are for the people live on the call. If you haven't looked at D&H, give them a look, see if they have what you need. It's kind of nice to have some of the still traditional hardware things that you need to order have to come from somewhere. And then now that they kind of have some of the services stuff in there, you might be able to kind of, take a lot of pieces and check the boxes here. But you don't know until you look, right? So I assume, Jason, it's not hard to go, knock on the door and say, hey, what's on your line card? Let's take a look.
Yeah, it's so easy. I mean, www.dandh.com is the website. I'm happy to talk to anybody. You can email me at jbystrak, Bystrak, at dandh.com. Happy to get you up. We give everybody a dedicated sales rep, all based out of primarily Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. They're all U.S.-based folks that that we assign to support you. And again, we can give you the combination of all the hardware that you want, pretty much across the board, as well as any of the cloud and services piece. And we feel we really do understand the SMB market, the MSPs that support that market. That's our sweet spot.
Awesome. Keith Nelson, you finish all those cigars from IT Nation, buddy?
Getting close. 25 doesn't last long, George.
You are a connoisseur, my friend. I know you love those cigars.
Yeah, it's interesting what he brings up, because I think what's going on is, as we have a little bit of an economic slowdown or whatever the correct political word to say is, people are getting laid off. And it's a recession until you're laid off, then it's a depression. But I think that he's onto what MSPs need to do. And the worst part we can do as MSPs is encumber cost to us, because we're always looked at as a cost center. So when we bundle these packages together into business process enhancement, you're offloading the cost onto sales or finance or production or manufacturing. And so it's not like we're not the ones going to the well for money. They are. And we're just putting in the back end support and package to implement it. So I've always said we need the underlying magic things MSPs do. I think it's our presentation on how we do it. When you go into finance, especially in these tough times, and say, I want to add some super security stuff, they go, you sold me super security stuff last year. Why do I need new super security stuff? But when you're talking about it in enhancing the existing business flow, working with partners, their business partners, not ours, and lowering the risk surface, then you have a conversation we'll talk about.
I think one of the challenges, listen, technology is constantly growing. It's not shrinking, it's growing. We know this, right? But to your point, Keith, right? Like, if at what point is there a balancing act, right? I think there always is, but to that specific concept, right? Like, your customers got to continue needing more and more services as time goes on, because things get more complex and there's going to be more tools to handle those complexities. But like, there has to be an affordability part in there too, right? Like, people need to understand the expectation around where their spend's going. Do you still put into your situation that there's like an annual percentage increase that's still happening, or how are you because I know a lot of MSPs continue that increase and they try and work within those additional dollars rather than go back and having to actually add it into completely new addendum to whatever their agreement services package is. I know there's a fine line, but you can't always go back and ask for more. I think there's got to be some sort of realistic time planning around that.
I like to go with, if you're making more, you can ask for more. And that's kind of my back end philosophy. If I'm against a baseline, so your income's not going to improve because you're my customer, right? Your income's not going to improve, your efficiency's not going to improve, then all of a sudden I'm a cost bearing. And as soon as I ask for money, you're going, hey, now you're in my pocket. You're in my profit pocket. But if I walk in there and say, I've improved your capacity, I've improved your efficiencies. I've enhanced your workflow, and I've allowed you to take on new customers because of this efficiency. Now there's a bigger bucket for us to share into. So that's kind of my philosophy on it is if we're stagnant buckets, yeah, then we're the first one says, hey, that's just expense. That looks like we should cut there.
It's almost like I'm obviously a big sports fan, so are you, but so is Jason. But you like how the variability. Well, we don't like the same teams, that's for sure. You realizing how some of the major sports, kind of, guys are they're doing a variation in their pricing based on how, important or how well attended the game might be or not, right? So like the way you're approaching it is like, hey, it's like, hey, if I'm making you more money, then I should be able to get more rather than a static price. And I think that that's kind of counter to a lot of how MSPs usually sell their services.
Right. You have to be able to stack it against measurable results.
Yeah.
Like where guys stop being late to work because of our dispatch system, how much did that save you? Well, that's a lot more than you paid me.
It's interesting. I would love to be able to have MSPs go back and be like, hey, I made you a ton of money this month. I'm going to send you a bigger invoice. That'd be cool. I'm sure that, but there's a counter to that. Hey, I didn't meet my, your system was down for half the month. So I guess I got to take less, Yeah,
that is. Yeah. I mean, we have SLAs that say if that's why we brag about installed in 2000, no loss of data, no missed dispatches, no crashes. And that's why I spend a lot of time engineering that. And yeah, because the reward's there. But they spent that money because we had an established reward. It was not just here's a new little, widget we can sell you. It was we can get these guys to work and stop paying you having to pay overtime and pay them while they're running to work. And that's a big, that's a measurable. With Boeing, we can get you paid by the Air Force 90 days earlier on the C-17.
That's cool. That's a cool.
That's money in your pocket.
It would be, I know a lot of people, Jason, especially when new security stuff's rolled out, because the end user largely views these security things as additional steps they need to take in order to just do the stuff they've been doing this whole time. So like, to Keith's point, like the actual experience to the end user may be, like you're trying to make that as best you can, but at the end of the day, like some extra steps need to be taken in order to make sure that you're not, doing things in a way that you leave the door open. And we all have heard many horror stories, I'm sure, about bad things that have happened. And usually those bad things happen because somebody in between the seat and the keyboard pressed the wrong button.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, George, 100%. Keith's spot on too. But the one thing about security, I mean, like his point about if you can save them money and actually help the business piece, that's awesome. And if you can justify and document that, that could turn into cash for you, right? But security, I think even difficult clients, let's say, understand that security is a constantly changing landscape that's getting more and more complex, that there's new types of threats, new bad actors out there that they've got to prevent against, and then new technologies evolving to prevent all that. I mean, like one of the things that seems so simple and basic about, you mentioned the keyboard piece, right? Is that more and more the security companies we're working with are just offering basic training, that goes across the company, right? Video-based training delivered and things like that. Well, there's a cost to it, but the results are very positive in preventing your company like that. And let's face it, in IT, I think we've always been good at selling things when we can scare people a little bit, whether it be security or data protection and backup and things like that. And frankly, it's part of the job, right? Because bad things do happen. And it's like an insurance policy. Nobody wants to pay for it, but you definitely need it.
Well, I would argue that the mainline news, whether you like them or not, has helped spread some of the more, kind of bigger ones that have gotten hit, right? And I think that is probably a good thing, right, for people who are going in trying to sell security services. But at the end of the day, my big challenge, and I mentioned this in the last call, but I'll bring it up now, is as, everybody thinks, hey, down economy, but there's a lot of opportunity. There absolutely is, but a lot of the people in the sales chair or responsible for sales at the MSP IT services provider level, it takes additional, I don't know, tricks in the bag, a little bit of experience to like super overcome objections now, right? Because now the check signers are a little bit more safeguarded around the money that they are going to spend or not, right? So I don't know, like usually that's a time thing, right? You got to try, you got to fail, you got to try again. But going into the next, I don't know, year or two with, the economy sounding like it's going the way that it's going to continue going, like I'm not sure that the average MSP owner-led sales guy, or even just the sales guy in an MSP, has had to work that hard in order to get something across the line.
Yeah, you're right. And, I think it's also, it's always really hard and expensive sometimes to do marketing, if you will. And part of a good marketing strategy for MSPs, we find, is education to their end clients, right? Like, just like, hey, here are some of the security things that are happening in the world. Here are some of the data issues and breaches and, and business failovers that happened, and keeping them educated about that, so that when you present those technologies and those investments required, you're not coming in blind. That's why even like the business reviews that MSPs need to do are so critical, that you're not just showing up one day and saying, hey, I haven't talked to you in a year, it's time to, I want to sell you some more stuff, right? That never works. One of the things we're doing, I know there's some other companies that do it pretty well too, is content syndication, because it's tough for an MSP to find time to let's go write an article about security threats or aggregate some news stories. We do a lot of that stuff and have a content syndication opportunity where you can push that out to the end clients as an MSP, right, with your brand on it. And I think that kind of education is just so critical.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because content creation is very time consuming, no question about that. I think part of the problem, let me ask you this question, this is a little wrinkle. We'd love to hear the crowds comment on this. I feel like in past years, if a customer of yours ran into a problem, you didn't necessarily put that out on a billboard and say, hey, look over here. But I feel like today, when that customer is like, you don't have to go to the news headline, they're the accounting office down the street or the lawyer around the corner, and then they were the people that didn't do what they needed to do and they got hit. And like, that's more of a, hey, that's on the home front, right? Like, if you don't believe me, maybe you want to go talk to them, and I'll intro you and you can hear it, point blank. I feel like that tide has shifted, right? Especially with the security stuff.
Customer testimonials are powerful. I think there's not a better way to, show your wider customer base or potential customers the kind of work that you do, is when you can, show how you solved a specific problem or an incident for a client, right? That saved them time, money, maybe even saved their whole business.
Yeah. Matthew Fox is always eating a sandwich in the background on these calls. He says that those New Yorkers are hard to sell to, even in a good year. So I don't know what's going to happen with the economy being down. I'm sure he's in the background saying, oh my God, he called my name. That's all right, Matthew. I'll leave you alone, buddy. But if you want to come and chat, all good. I mean, have you experienced, because, you're in upstate New York, all the way up in Buffalo. Actually, I don't know if that even counts as upstate, but do you feel like different parts of the country have different buying behaviors? Meaning, like, do you see like acceleration in certain areas versus not? Because you're doing business on a macro scale, right? So I don't know what you see that we don't.
Yeah, I think to an extent, there are definitely different trends in different geographies. Certain areas that are more tech savvy and willing to adopt newer technologies versus are more of a wait and see type of approach, right? I think even the economy impacts different parts of the country in different ways, right? Based on, where we're seeing macroeconomic issues like that, no question. I think, but I think the MSPs tend to, at least the ones we work with, tend to be more localized, right? And they know how to respond and react to that type of stuff. So when we have some discussions, a lot of times we'll collaborate on what's happening with that and how we can, help them to, still continue to push forward with the growth goals that they have.
Yeah. So with the X as a service program that you were mentioning earlier, how does that differ from like traditional leasing or financing, right? Because like, obviously everybody's credit's probably now in question, and, given the current interest rates, stuff like that. So if I were to like go to a customer and they're like, not sure I want to spend all of this at once, what is that program? How does that work? Like, what are the steps?
Yeah. Well, if you just want a monthly payment, you can do that with a lease or with X as a service, right? Both will accomplish that. But when a couple of differences with X as a service, first of all, because it's got a minimum of services attached to it, meaning maintenance or warranty for the period, It's got support for the period, and it has prepaid asset disposition, right? So at the end of the time commitment, the term, that technology is removed and refreshed, right? And they have an option to keep it going. Because those are in there, it actually counts as an operating expense, which is tax deductible, right? I'll asterisk check with your accountant before you take my word for it. But the end client gets a tax deduction on that because it's an expense, because it's delivered as a service. Versus most traditional leases would not qualify. The IRS changed the tax codes a few years back, because people were just using leases to trying to deduct that as a tax advantage. Really, it was still a capital purchase, a capital expense. So they closed that, and X as a service is a way to reopen that back up and likely get some tax advantages for your client. So that's a big thing. And then I think for the partner, I think, a couple of the big things is bundling in the services with the hardware. It makes you stickier. It creates a refresh cycle where you get to have another transaction at the end of that, mostly because nobody wants all the hardware removed at the end of that, right? They're going to say, yeah, definitely keep the services going, right? And it allows you to bundle and attach those services so that you can sometimes command just a bit more margin than maybe you would have if you had to kind of itemize those separately. So there's a lot of good reasons, to do that. And I'll tell you, the OEMs we work with on the hardware side, and a lot of it's endpoint devices, right? And we can do X as a service for anything hardware-wise, but it's largely notebooks and desktops. And vendors like HPI, Lenovo, Dell, they're all about putting things in that model because it actually speeds up the refresh cycle. So you think about the average notebook, I think we saw last, people keep it for 5.5 years. If you put them on a 3-year X as a service program, you get a new transaction every 3 years where you get all that revenue and profit up front each time. Whereas if you wait the full 5.5 years, that's a lot of time to not sell something, right? So there's a lot of benefits to the MSPs to move to that model too.
Wow, I didn't realize that was the actual math on that, right? They always said, hey, the manufacturers always want you to switch every 2-3 years. But I didn't realize the average was 5.5 years.
You wouldn't believe some of the old gear that we're pulling out, with this program. That's just shocking, right? Yeah, but it's a great
labor cost at the end user from using outdated equipment that frustrates the user, which causes them to circumvent all your automated systems you built in because their laptop sucks. You're going you could buy one every year to offset the labor costs from bad equipment. And I don't think enough MSPs point that out to their end customers. I'm not costing you money, I'm saving you money because your most important, your biggest line item is labor. And any business you pull up, basically, most of them, you go, your labor and your burden rate on labor is where your money is. Your little bit of laptops you bought over there is nothing. And if you can keep your clients using your automated system, happy, feeling good, and efficient with a cycling refresh rate, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. And what about you as an MSP when you got to go manage, 74 different models of laptops or something, right? I mean, it's that raises your cost to patch it and support those things too. So it's a win-win. They get better technology and productivity. You get to hopefully reduce your, cost operating.
The best one is when they got the Best Buy Black Friday email. Come on. Went to the store, they got it half.
Well, we don't all have George money, so it's
oh yeah, I get those emails every day. They don't wait till Black Friday for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole bring your own device thing, I don't think has turned out as well as everybody thought that it would. I think it's been challenging at best, especially when the home user, even when a business ships a computer to the person working at home, give them a pretty good idea of what they have, right? You can try and walk them through it, or maybe do the webcam thing, like a FaceTime style thing, right? To figure out what's broken. But especially if they come up with any sort of thing underneath the sun, yeah, that's fun. Especially when corporate IT or even the MSP has no clue what the networking is at the home office. And they're trying to explain to you that nothing's working. And you're like, I don't even know what you have. Where's the router? Oh, that's in the basement. Can you imagine that at scale with every single device? I don't think it actually works.
No, the bring your own device in the real world is really the guy. Can I put my phone on your network? I really rarely see someone bringing, their if they bring in their own, like a Mac guy goes and says, it's kind of virtually a business, now a company computer. The ownership really doesn't matter. It's got our agent, our antivirus, our network, we're scanning it. You may lose your data because now you're working on a quasi company computer. I haven't seen in the real world anything besides phones or tablets being prevalent.
Hold on, let me throw a wrinkle. Let me throw a real world wrinkle at you, Jason. So you go into this, as a service, X as a service. This device goes to somebody working out of a home office. What happens if the equipment never made it back at the end, right? You say that you have like this disposal thing built into it. What if it never got turned back in? What happens then?
Yeah, I mean, there's agreements and there's some flexibility in how we structure those too, but there's an agreement that it's got to come back or somebody's liable for it, right? 100%, but there's different ways to structure it to reduce that liability or even eliminate it as well. So, it would be so easy just to have a one size fits all program all the time, but it just doesn't work like that in the real world.
Yeah, I can tell you for a fact, just talking to all the people that we talk to on a regular basis. I mean, the whole hybrid working thing, yeah, it's not going anywhere. We know that, but like, people don't turn their stuff back in. I don't care whether they got a shipping label or they got to ship it on their own. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes it just never shows up.
No, you're right. Another thing we do with that too is that you think about repairs and things like that. Is the nice thing about the program is it has allowances for spares, like a spare pool that's built in. Because when you start chopping everything up into a monthly payment, like if you say, hey, write me an $800,000 check, that's hard to do. But if it's like the difference between, paying, $7,000 a month or $7,120 a month, you can kind of bury in a spare pool model. And we've got an allowance that does that as part of the program too.
Wow, that, speed is king, right? Especially, I'm sure you guys were affected somewhere along the line with the, supply chain and lack of stuff showing up when it's supposed to and delays and all this, whatever. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't you. It was the fact that it never turned up, right? Like the manufacturer didn't get their stuff to you, right? So that's the most frustrating part when when you need it and it's just, you're on hold.
Yeah, I think everybody was affected by supply chain. We're still not out of the woods, though. I would say the device side of the business has then been flowing much better recently. And some of the networking product lines, we're still seeing some backlog for sure.
So weird that I feel like it's all coming from the same manufacturing plant somewhere, and they're behind. But yeah. Okay, I digress.
Better. I mean, I was recently at just for example, the HPE conference and a Cisco conference, and they talk very specifically about their strategies to help with supply chain long term, like to build redundancies in and eliminate those points. I mean, who knew? We always reserve the right to get smarter as an industry, right? And same goes for them. And I was really impressed with some of the things they're doing to improve, future-proof that stuff.
For some reason, like networking gear switches was one. And another one that was really odd that everybody talked about for a long time? Monitors. Like for some reason, you just couldn't ever find monitors. And then I love some of the manufacturers, like when you put in, like even like especially server orders, sometimes it was like 4, 5, 6 months, like took a long time.
Yeah, lots of the components, the pandemic and then labor shutdowns and things like that. It definitely so many reasons. It was just a perfect storm of supply chain issues for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear it's a little bit better. In
LA, you can pull. There's no waiting. Pull right up to the berth.
Wow. I mean, remember, Keith, there was like 200 boats off the shore at one point.
Well, yeah, the contract's up for renewal, and so the stevedores redirected them to the Gulf, which then ran into 2 weather systems, and the Gulf doesn't dredge their ports for super tankers because they have the Everglades and all that other stuff. So that's why you have a lettuce shortage. Crops rotting on the boat. But right now in LA, Long Beach, as of yesterday, it was a 0 wait time for a berth assignment.
Wow,
that's awesome.
First time in many years, many months.
Let's hope it stays that way. We really appreciate to not have more problems there. Jason, how does it work when an MD comes and asks for like a credit line with D&H? How does that, like, I assume you're giving that out, and I'm sure there's an application, but it's available, yeah?
Yeah, we've extended just in the past year over $400 million in additional downstream credit. We're pretty flexible. A guy named Matt Riley runs our credit department. The guy's fantastic. I've never worked someplace where they're so flexible with the credit. He comes up with creative solutions for people that have these huge one-off deals that happen. It's always a good thing, right? But it is almost never that I hear us say no to people, right? So it's pretty easy to get a net 30 terms line set up with us and get rolling.
That's awesome. And then, last time I checked, I think your company is like employee owned. I remember every time I talk to somebody, they're like, yeah, I'm a part owner of the company. I'm like, how does that work? But apparently that's how you're set up.
Yeah, it's a neat status. And I would actually encourage MSPs to talk to us about it, right? Dan and Michael Schwab, our co-presidents, love to talk with partners one-on-one about the structure, but it's called an ESOP. And essentially 36% of the profits are distributed amongst all of the co-owners. Everybody's a co-owner. That works for the company, and it goes into an account and then is invested. So it's kind of you basically have equity, and I think it breeds a good culture. Like we really are, we're not a public company, so we don't have to answer to Wall Street, right, or a PE firm. We're not of course we have quarters like everybody, but we're focused on long-term decisions that are right for our company and for our partners, and we don't have to answer to anybody else. So it's a neat structure.
That's awesome. Well, I know a lot of people have dabbled in that. I mean, I know there's a lot of complexities to it, but, kind of like a built-in, hey, you're an employee, but also you have a stake in the company. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it breeds a good culture. They really, I really have enjoyed the culture coming in and the way we take care of our partners, both in the vendor and the MSP side. And then, really just, we turn the lights out when we walk out of a conference room, right? Because we know that it saves a few pennies, right? And that kind of stuff makes a difference. The way people treat the money as if it's theirs, because it is theirs, right?
That's to work. You guys do a bunch of events throughout the year, right? I know you had a big one in Hershey, and I wasn't able to make that one, but I think you have like an annual event now, and then you have kind of like a roadshow thing. How does that work?
Yeah, we do a number of them. We have two big ones that we call the thread events, right? We did Anaheim and Hershey this year. We have a lot of smaller regional events. We do city socials. In fact, there's one coming up in Houston, December 7th, right? Along with the Hewlett Packard Enterprise. But we do city socials around, which kind of one day or one afternoon type of events. And then we also have our PartnerFi community. So if you're interested in a community group that like-minded people sharing best practices, a lot of perks and key information from our vendor partners in there. PartnerFi has really taken off as a great peer-to-peer community group that we've got as well, and we do events with them. So
that's awesome. So you guys are out there and you're trying to build into the community, which is great. So where do you think 2023 goes? Big picture. Flat, growth, decline? I know it's everybody's guess, and could turn on any financial news channel and hear them too, but big picture, gut feeling, where do you think we end up at the end of 23?
Well, we're planning on growth for sure. And some of that growth is going to be market driven based on some of the areas we're investing in, such as managed services, right? That's a growth area, such as cloud that continues to grow, such as video collaboration as people kind of perfect the hybrid work. Those are areas we're seeing grow like crazy. We're also, I think too that now there's been some consolidation in the distribution industry too. There's some folks that are knocking on our door saying, "Hey, we want to work with you a little more at D&H," right? And we're approaching $6 billion in revenue, so we're big enough to be able to have resources and thankfully the capabilities to really take care of our partners. And we're humbled and honored to be rewarded with some increase in business as a result of some of these market trends like that. So I think it's going to be both organic and just people looking at what we're doing over here.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited for that then. I know you guys also just built a brand new warehouse out in that area too, which is awesome. I think that was the year before, right? So just been on an upward trajectory, which is great. I'm excited for the next few years, only because hey, if it isn't worth doing, it's usually hard if it's worth doing, right? If it's easy, then everybody can do it. But I do know that people are going to struggle in the community, right? Some businesses, like nobody expected what COVID was going to be, and they just were in the wrong verticals, heavily focused. And, that just was, wasn't that long ago that a lot of people were like, hey, you need to, be focused in the specific, industry. And then that way you can, double down on your efforts and grow through that bubble. And then, I feel like after COVID, everybody flipped that around. It's like, oh no, you need to diversify. You need to be in a little bit of everything. And I'm like, so which one is it, guys? Let's make up our mind. Right. But, I think, I do subscribe to the, all boats, can float higher together as a group. I do love the IT channel community that we're all a part of. I think last week was a strong representation of that, right? Just a lot of smart people talking about all sorts of different scenarios. To me, I still think that's the best way to learn. I mean, I'm all for learning from experts and jumping into a breakout session somewhere. But, when I get into a parking lot, I talk to Keith Nelson, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And, then you hear from real world experience. So, but all that being said, I do think that if everybody's rowing in the same direction, you can kind of balance out kind of some of how the market, fluctuations are. And I also think that, and we had Oli on last week from Alvaca out in California. He kind of made a good point. He's like, the channel's kind of like a train, right? And like sometimes the MSP community is kind of at the back of that train, and the couplings in between the cars haven't smushed all together yet before we felt the effect at the end, right? So it was a great analogy. I've never heard that particular one. I totally subscribe to it. I wonder, from a technology standpoint, we're seeing, and I hear it all over the place, 10% cut here, 15% cut here, 20% cut here. I know Twitter is a unique situation, 75% of the company, but I just feel like all of a sudden there's going to be a lot more people on the street, and like the employment market's going to shift the other way. There's going to be a lot more people looking for jobs than jobs are available. So
all signs are pointing that way, George. I think you're right.
Yeah, I just think that, moving forward, I know everybody has their way that they see the world. I liked how Oli presented it last call, Keith. By the way, how was his event? I know he had his
they are truly awesome people, and I can't say enough about them. Frank was there. Awesome. Kevin flew out. They're just a great, respectable MSP. They're really quite an organization, and they do some amazing things. They have a really good SOC there, so on. Just parlaying into the layoffs, you go, but you got to look what Amazon and Twitter's an anomaly. I mean, that's just a mess. Let's just forget that, because I don't think we get any financial information from that. But if you look deep at what like Amazon was doing, they're really getting rid of stuff they were speculative on, right? The layoffs are not really in the warehouse as much as some of the, the Prime TV and the Prime Sports, and it was dig down and you'll look and see a lot of these guys were betting on unlimited growth with unlimited government spending. And I'm not sure that we're hitting the core yet with the layoffs. And so as you read down the technology layoffs, I think it was stuff that people were leaning towards, I think we'll still have a good, there'll be a good market. There'll be some cleanups. You'll have to make, you have to be in business to make money, and that's always the case. But as there are those layoffs, the systems don't go away, right? You still have to run your POS system. You still have to run your security. And so it probably scales better with an MSP who can fill those gaps.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder when Walmart is going to accept cards with the Wave, right? You can't use Apple Pay. You can't use Amber. You can't do the Wave. You have to plug it in. It reminds me of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like for the longest time, they're one of the few professional sporting stadiums where they only took cash. Like, when can we make sure that they can keep some tech people on there to fix that part? Can we do that? George pet peeves, man. What can I say? Guys, I really appreciate you guys for jumping out. Again, if you came out last week and we saw you, that was just epic. I think we created a little bit of channel history last week. Never going to forget that one. If you're in Florida or Atlanta, we're literally rolling through your town. Love to see you guys come out. channelstrongtour.com. Hit up DNH, check them out. If you're like, have some questions, you'll rewind this session and maybe go back and pick some of Jason's words apart and then go back and say, what did you mean by this? Or just hit him up. I'm sure you can, he's on all the platforms. I promise you, you can reach him or hit him up via email. He gave his email out earlier. And for everyone else, hey, we're still doing these sessions Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. They're all being posted online. Let's get to the end of the year intact, right? I want to close out 2022 strong because 2023 is a little bit of a question mark. And, you know, rather be in a solid position to move forward than guessing game. So nobody likes quicksand. And the more partners you have to help you get where you're trying to go, the better off it is, because nobody has all the resources to do it all on their own. That's a fact. All right, guys. Appreciate your time. Jason, thanks for jumping on. Catch you guys on the flip side.
Thank you, George. Great times.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Take care.